Okay. So today on the agenda, we've got some quick announcements, maybe. No.
I do have three. Yeah, I have three announcements. So, but I didn't add the slides. Sorry about that, Michael.
No, my fault. And then we've got release overview. Since the last meeting, we released 29.0. We'll have a brief update on column lineage from Pawel. Overview of a new feature. We've got soft delete in the UI now from Howard. And from Willy, news about OpenLineage facets in Marquez and the state of the roadmap for 2023. And we'll round out today's meeting with open discussion. So announcements, I think, is first.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Marquez is part of the Linux Foundation, and we did have a yearly review booked for this month. So I think there's a new date that was set. I think it's next month, Michael, for February 9th. So we do these yearly check-ins and talk about the current status, because our goal, at least in the early part of this year, is to graduate as a top-level project in the Linux Foundation. So LFAI and data. So that's going to be a huge milestone for the project, and really excited for all that have been involved to making that happen, especially you, Michael. You keep tabs on all these things, just checklists that we have to, or these requirements that we have to meet. So just want to say thanks for being on top of it. And there was two other ones that were, so Julian Ledem, who's also part of the Marquez project, but he's also the project lead in OpenLineage. And I just want to say that he will be giving talks at Data Console and Surface 2020 or Surface 2023. I don't know if the best way I could just add the links in a slide, but he'll be talking about OpenLineage, and for sure we'll be mentioning Marquez in there as part of the story. So for those who are using Marquez or just getting started, I think getting a background on OpenLineage is going to be really important to make the most out of the lineage metadata that you're collecting and storing in Marquez. Oh, and looks like Howard, you're going to be there. Where is it this year?
Austin, the same place.
Is it in Austin? Oh, okay,
yeah.
Okay.
I know.
So, lucky you. But I'll just post the links quickly in the slide here. Oops, wrong link. But those are the two announcements I had, Michael.
Okay, thanks. All right. Okay, so since our last meeting, we released Marquez 29.0 and featuring additions to the API, the UI, the chart, and docs. And I think the headline here, most of us might agree, is column lineage. We added column lineage to the API and the UI with this release, and Pawel's going to get into more detail about it briefly in a moment. But that involved adding support for point-in-time requests, and those are supporting requests by dataset version, job version, dataset field of a specified dataset version. We also added point-in-time Java client methods, and you might want to know that what we've done is replace the existing methods by a single get column lineage method that takes node ID as a parameter. So those three methods that were replaced are the get column lineage by dataset, get column lineage by dataset, and dataset field. So let me see. That's not right, is it? Sorry. What's the third method? We had get column lineage by dataset and get column lineage by dataset field, but there's a third one. Does anyone know?
Run ID.
Run ID. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry about-
it should be outlined in the, if it's a breaking change, it should be in our change logs in terms of like what methods. If not, I think we should make that clear that there are some methods that are renamed.
Yeah. Yes, sorry about that. My notes are incomplete here. Also in the API, we added an index created at column to the lineage events table, and that is backwards compatible. And it's intended to support analytics use cases. That's probably the most common use for this, and it's a timestamp column. In the UI, we had several key additions, starting with column lineage. This is now available with a single level of depth in the database details tab. Coming in 30.0 is column lineage in the seed data, so you can see it in action in more detail with the seed data. That's exciting. We also, in the UI, added a new events page, an event viewer that enables filtering by date. And you can expand each event. You get more of the payload by clicking on each event. That is very cool. We also styled that to make it fit with the overall styling theme of Marquez. The design system, I should say. Last addition to the UI that I'll mention is we added an internationalization plugin to React and support for German, Polish, French, and Spanish, and hopefully more languages to come, and a language switcher. In the Helm chart, we updated the ingress template for cross-compatibility with recent Kubernetes versions. And in the docs, we added a delete namespace endpoint doc to the Open API docs. So those are some of the key additions. There were also a number of fixes, as is always the case, and I wanted to give a quick shout out to new contributor John. He contributed the Helm chart edition, and new contributor Vlad, who contributed the event viewer. So that's what 29.0 looks like.
And Michael, you mind if so that raw event viewer, some may not have seen it. You mind if I just show it really quickly? This is sort of like off the agenda, but I just wanted to show it really quick because I think it's just a great addition to the UI. So here you could pick the dates. So from and to. So as you're collecting OpenLineage events, you're then able to just display them. So if you're on the left side here, you'll see a new events tab, and then you can just select the date. So to and from there as well. And then what will show up are the raw OpenLineage events, and it's tabular as well. So you could kind of go through and see different pages. But the most important part is when you click on it, you're able to see the raw OpenLineage event. And I think that's what's key here. So I just wanted to show that. So as you're trying out Marquez and you're asking yourself, how is this metadata eventually, or what is the metadata that's displaying the lineage graph? You're now able to see the raw event that Marquez uses for runs and jobs and inputs and outputs to eventually build that lineage on the back end, which is why you eventually see a graph like this. Yeah. So now you're able to see the raw events that built out the graph.
Yeah, it is very cool. All right. Thanks. Next up on the agenda is a brief update on column lineage in the UI. And
Okay, let me share my screen for a moment.
sorry.
Could you, Michael, stop sharing?
Yeah.
Okay, I hope you see my Chrome browser. So some time ago, we showed a page with workshops where we do have some Spark workshops where help you and guide you through some of our Marquez and OpenLineage features to present how do they work. So yeah, many thanks to Howard Yu who created this page, and I hope we'll get more and more of them. And last year we created some notebook, Spark notebook to show what can be extracted from the column lineage. And yeah, and the only problem here was that we always showed some JSONs got from the API, and we were not able to see those column lineage stuff in Marquez, which is actually super helpful because if you are in the development phase, you are doing POC, you would like to sending some events, and you would like to immediately look into Marquez and find out if the column lineage is collected or not. And actually now it's possible. So I've created some dummy smart, super small Spark workbook, which creates dataset A with 2 columns, and then it creates dataset B, which is just a result of such a query. So it sums 2 columns from dataset A. And the point is that if you go in Marquez to a dataset tab and you find the dataset B and you look at it, you've got an extra tab in dataset information. It's called column lineage, and if you click on it, you get the column lineage facets telling that, hey, this column has been created based on those 2 input fields, col1 and col2. And I wouldn't call it a big feature, but if you are testing your integration, it's really important to be able to immediately find out, hey, am I sending the right events? Is it correct? And that's the feature that tells you, yeah, that's what you sent. Yeah, you can verify it really early. And so that's the demo part of the UI. The other interesting thing that you mentioned already was a point in time capability of column level lineage feature. So not only you can ask how was the column tree created today, but also you can ask the API how was it created a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and perhaps you can go per version and see how did it change. So it's still not visible in the UI, but the API is capable of it, and I hope that soon we'll see even more of cool features that you can show in the UI based on the column lineage. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Questions for Pawel while we have him?
No questions, but I'll also I'll share just last night, just this morning, we merged a PR that added column level stuff to the seed data. So if you are running off of, if you check out main and you run the Docker up with -s, it'll seed it with column level lineage. So you can see what it might look like on the seed data, fresh off the presses.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ross, and also thanks for the demo, Pawel. I hope this inspires someone to maybe do some cool UI work. I think initially I looked at it, I'm like, the JSON, it's helpful, but it's not, visually, I think it would be amazing to add somehow, whether it's in that tab or to the lineage graph or something. But I think this is a great seed for someone who's ambitious and wants to flex their React muscle. But I think it'd be cool to have some additions there, but great work.
I have a question to Ross. When you're adding those seed data, any particular data set that the seed data is there, or so where can we find those new seed data?
So the actual seed data itself is in docker/metadata.json. And so I basically parsed all the SQL queries with my brain and wrote them. But when you look at the Marquez seed data in practice, what you'll find it on is on the output data sets. And so if I were sharing my screen, I could show you, but I'll send you a link to the one that has it. But you wouldn't find it on the input data sets. If there's a job and an input data set and an output data set, you find it on the output data set. Okay. So and it wouldn't be on the leftmost ones because there are input data sets missing from the leftmost jobs in the seed data. So you have to move over a couple to find them.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
But yeah, we hand roll we maintain a metadata.json, which is just an array of OpenLineage events. So, but prior to that, we had it all in Java in a command. But now I think for flexibility and I think ease of contributions, we just have a JSON file, and that's what we use when we spin up our Docker images to see the backend.
All right. Well, thank you, Pawel, again, for that update on column lineage. One of the most requested, I would say, probably one of the most requested recent additions to the project. Very exciting to see it in the UI. As always, contributions are very welcome. There's a contributor's guide in the repo. In a moment, I'll put a link to that in the Slack. Next up, we have an overview of a new feature, a soft delete option also in the UI. And this is from Howard.
Thank you. It's a quick feature, and I'm very happy that we could showcase during the Marquez community meeting. So I'll just share the screen and tell you what it's all about. So this is one of a couple of enhancements that we've been doing in terms of the UI, and also the general usability of the Marquez is so far, we haven't really been able to delete anything on the lineage graph. So if anything is entered into Marquez, then it will be there for a very long period of time unless we filter anything. So there has been a lot of ask about, hey, can we remove some of those jobs or remove some of those data sets that either has been incorrectly entered, or they are not really useful in looking at the lineage data. So, or maybe just for the tidying up purposes, we want to delete them. And therefore, I believe a API for deleting a data set, API for deleting job was introduced, as well as API for deleting all the jobs and data sets under a single namespace. Now, we don't really have a UI for deleting namespaces, but we do have UI for deleting jobs, which what I'm about to show you. When you click any of the jobs or data sets, you should notice that there is now a button that says delete on it. So when you click it, obviously, it's going to ask you, are you sure? And when you say continue, it's gonna invoke a logical deletion routine that's gonna delete the particular selected data set in this case. The UI actually takes you back into the data set list because now that the data set is obviously gone, so it's unable to render the graph. But when you go back to the graph, you now see that the data set you have selected is now gone and it's not available. There's currently thank you.
Oh no! Oh, this is cool. But what happened? Oh, so there's an ETL categories job that's hanging.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, obviously it doesn't really delete any of the the upstream or the downstream dependents. So you still see the ETL categories as a kind of a dangling job in this case under the namespace. So in order to delete that, you could you can actually select it. And obviously this is another example of job deletion where now the job actually has the delete button, the similar delete button as the data set. So when you click it, it's going to delete that ETL categories. And when you go back to the chart, then both of them are now gone from the graph.
Howard, just curious, what happens if you delete something in the middle of the graph that would turn it into two graphs?
I was going to ask the same question.
Well, I don't think so. It's just gonna make, for example, if I kind of delete this, I think all the arrows will be gone, but I think all the other guys who belong to the food delivery namespace will just remain the same thing. So let me just try to do that. The ETL delivery senders, if I delete them, and go back. Oh, no. Oh, yeah.
It splits the graph. Yep.
Yeah, it splits the graph. Yeah, it does that. So, but if you go to the another job set that belongs to another graph, yeah, perhaps there will be another lineage graph on that. So yeah, I mean that's the that's the gist of it. So those are the deletion feature on both the job set and data set. I do like the fact that we can now start deleting the job set and the data set, but didn't actually, I think there could be some enhancements on the way the users are notified. For example, when we delete something, it just go back to the jobs page. And so, we might just put some sort of message here that says, you just delete a job set. And then another one is maybe we could kind of go back to the graph where it belonged and kind of display it, without having to be led into this page. But, that's kind of a future enhancement. And I do hope that we would also have some sort of a deletion features for the namespaces so that we don't have to go through all the job and data set manually and delete the whole thing. But yeah, that's it. So that's the new feature that I wanted to present and hope you guys find it useful. And if you have any comments or feedbacks, any enhancements, please create an issue or let us know so that we can make it even better. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions for Howard about the soft delete feature in the UI?
Oh, by the way, if you resubmit the deleted jobs or data sets, it's going to reappear.
Yeah, and I think I was going to make a comment on that. The reason why this feature took so long was that it took a while to get to the point where we're going to soft delete metadata. So we never want to delete what's on the back end, because historically you want to know that at one point some data set exists and these are the jobs that depended on it and so forth. So it's ended up being driven through a flag. So when we do a query on the back end, we check to see if it's a soft delete. And if it is, we're not going to take it into account. I just wanted to point that out. But yeah, that was a philosophical thing when we were developing Marquez. Metadata should just be captured and never deleted. The next question becomes, who can delete metadata? Should it be an admin thing, or should it be something that's as accessible that anyone can perform? But perhaps in the roadmap, we'll talk about roles and authentication and things like that. Just a little hint.
Yeah. And perhaps in the future, maybe some auditing and would it be technically feasible to do an undelete? But I'm not sure. But yeah.
Could be. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Auth has been in a conversation about Marquez in the future. That would be really exciting. Thanks again, Howard. Next up on our agenda, let's see here. OpenLineage facets.
Okay, let me get set up here. Okay. Okay, so I just wanted to give a status update on where OpenLineage facets are, but also maybe just a quick overview on why this is such an important feature or optimization on the Marquez backend. If I go, anyone can view the proposal. So the proposal has been merged and it has been worked on with myself and Pawel, which Pawel has driven a lot of this, which is great. So I just wanted to point out that a lot of it actually has to do with query performance. So let me see if I can, I'll start with this. I'll start with the lineage events table. So the proposal goes in a bit more detail, but what ends up happening is we have this lineage events table and it has all the raw events. And within the raw event, you have those facets. So For job, you have a facet for documentation. For link to code, and for data set, you have a schema facet for the fields that are associated with that data set. Now we use that to populate the core model for Marquez, as well as when we do a lineage query or query some of the data sets and jobs. And if you use that API, we have to grab the facets. And the way we grab the facets is we go to the lineage events table. And that's okay for very small size tables. But once you get to 20 million plus, 40 million plus, there is a performance hit. But what we've also seen with customers in production using Marquez is that their lineage events can be over 10 MIGs. There was this one customer, or not one user, that we worked with that saw easily one event could be over 10 MIGs. And the result of that is you're loading all these facets in memory for that run, and then you're filtering out. So this is what this query points out here. And the result of that is you get out of memory exceptions. It just can't load all that metadata associated with the facets into memory, especially if it's a Spark query plan, or I'm sorry, a Spark logical plan. There's a lot of detail in there. So what we ended up deciding with the proposal is that we have these individual facet tables that now no longer require us to grab the universe and then filter on what we care about. It's already filtered for us, and it's associated with the data set and with a run. So there's a lot of metadata in those tables that allow us to rebuild the event and access it if we wanted to. So there's data set facets, job facets, and run facets. So yeah, I just wanted to point out that proposal and give some background. And not only that, this allows us to build more on top of facets themselves. This is the step one into leveraging the facet information, especially for custom facets that users define. We want to be able to provide tables that you can join on and build features on top of those tables themselves. The current status is that we have, oops, was that me? Yeah. So these are the 3 PRs that are associated with the feature. 2350 has been merged, and I think for the most part, 2359 has been approved. And the last one with a bit of discussion is 255. There's one thing that I do want to point out is that Marquez, or this feature, if you're using 12.1, you need a super user, because in order to do the migration in an efficient way, which Pawel documents, is that we have to use an extension, more specifically the UUID extension, which requires a super user to create that extension. So if you're running on 12.1 and below, that migration would need a super user, but we're still talking about that. So that's why it has been merged, and we will resolve it today, I'm hoping. But that's one thing we, go ahead, Mike.
Sorry, Willy, I just thought maybe this might be a good forum for soliciting feedback from users on the issue. So, you know, because right now the kind of existing alternatives that we've discussed are either upgrading Postgres to something beyond 13 or higher, running the migration as a super user, or possibly eliminating the UUID column from the facets table. And so, I think this is a great place to just kind of ask community members, hey, do you feel like this is an extra burden, or is it okay?
Mike, that's a great idea. Yeah, feedback, looking for it. Or is anyone running Postgres 12? That's the other thing. So I know some mentioned they're POCing Marquez or building an observability component in their data platform. Maybe what Postgres version did you run, or did you spin up? Or maybe, Mike, we send it to Slack as well. I think that would be.
I think we've got the response on the chat. PG12, it says.
Okay. Yeah, and that might have to do with the requirements. So I think in the requirements we put Postgres 12 as well. Okay. That makes sense. So then the follow-up question would be, is it a burden to say use a super user to install an extension? Because it's sometimes within an org, you're not the one spinning up the database. Usually, depending how big the org is, there might be an infra team that says, what do you need? I'll spin it up for you. And then I'll give you a user that doesn't have all the privileges, but just enough so you can run your application while they keep the root password. Okay.
Yeah, or maybe you know, you manage your deployment through a CI or CD process that's fully automated, in which case you have to depend on the permissions, whatever the CI user has, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll come back to it in the open discussion. So I'll continue, but I think this is a great discussion to pick up afterwards. And I know, Mike, did you get back? Yeah, okay. So that's where things are. And what I wanted to show you really quick, you know, there's a test environment that we have at Astronomer that I've been using to test out the migrations. And as you can see, some of there's 3 views that get created. There's a dataset facets view. There's job facet view as well, and it has all the facets broken down into types of documentation, source code location, SQL, all that's broken up.
Are you sharing something on the screen?
I am actually.
We see the presentation, at least I do. Perhaps just on my side.
No, thanks for. Okay, I'm just going to share my entire screen. Everyone close their eyes. Okay. There's just too much on my screen right now. Here we go.
Trust me, Willie, that's not that bad.
Yeah, I just hate doing it because it's like, oh man, there's just so much. Yeah, what I was saying was, you see the dataset facets view, and individually you'll see the name, so on. I know this is maybe kind of small. I could zoom in. Yeah. So you'll see that there's a data quality facet name, and I think I'm just ordering them. But in there, and here's the schema, you'll see the facet value. But in there, you also get the run ID, the lineage event time, as well as the event type, if it was started, failed, completed. And for data sets, they're a little bit different. I think there are data set values, there's unknown, I think there's input as well. And you get some detail with great expectation. But that view will be used in the queries that we are updating. So if you're doing a lineage query or we're listing out data sets, these views will be used. Same thing with job facets as well. This is kind of what I was mentioning with source code location and documentation. That's all broken up. And then finally, just the run facets themselves. So we have the nominal time, parent, and so forth. So yeah, that's what I wanted to show. And that's really where things are. We've been testing out the migration internally at Astronomer. I think there was a few things that came up that we are, Pawel, I think you addressed recently, and then some comments that Mike has made that I think are valid, and we want to discuss as well.
Willie, there's a question in the chat. Where can we get this metadata of each table and its relation?
Oh, the facets table that I showed, or I'm trying to think like which part here. So I just connected to the Marquez database, and these facet views are not yet part of the release. So this is coming in 0.30. You can, so yeah, the individual facets are not quite there. You could access them directly through the lineage events table. There's just so many tables now, I can't find it. Here you go. Yeah, you could access them individually in the lineage events table, and that's eventually what's also displayed on the front end through that event viewer. But yeah, the fact that someone asked that question is really exciting, because imagine, I mean, what I said before is you could build features on top now, and it's like, wait, you have individual facet metadata that's coming from OpenLineage, and it could be custom, and it could be something that you begin to extend on top of Marquez. Yeah. If I answered that.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, thanks for the information. I got it. Yeah.
Okay, great. So that's what I had on the facet stuff. I think, you know, it is scheduled for 030, Marquez 030 release. Now, depending on the discussion, you know, we could conclude things today or tomorrow, and then a release would for sure happen early next week. But that's just the current timeline for that. All right,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
cool.
Next up is the roadmap.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I think I found my screen. Ah, is that the right one? No. Here we go. So the roadmap itself, I kind of broke it down in three. I also want it to be more community based, or the community have more input in it. What I ended up thinking was about extensibility, scalability, and usability. Those are the three things when I thought about what can be improved in Marquez. And I think that the extensibility part is a very key thing. So on the back end, there's a search proposal. So I'm going to go a little bit out of order here. There's a search proposal that has been put together by Pawel. And that talks about an in-memory, sort of like a very lightweight search component, but also a back-end search a service that allows you, one, provide an implementation. I think we'll provide one for Elasticsearch, but if you wanted to use another search engine, there's a common interface that you can implement and then choose whatever backend that you wanted to use, or search backend. So that's a really key part. A lot of what we've been developing hasn't allowed the user to inject some of their code or some extra components that, you know, they are very specific to their data platform. So those are things that we have in mind. The search component, it goes very much into what we index, how often we maybe refresh that index. So there's a lot of details there. So I don't think there is we've slotted it for a release, but it's something that we want to do this year, just because we want to be able to leverage searching facets and searching descriptions. At the current moment, all you really have is, if I type in the search bar for data sets and jobs, we just look at the name. We don't really look beyond that. So I think there's a lot more that we can do there. The authentication part, that's also going to be very key. A lot of the users that we talk to, they are kind of okay with having their own sort of VPN, and just like if you hit the Marquez URL internally, you get hit with okay, you need to log in, and then you have full access. That could be okay, but with an org that's very, very large, you know, they have teams, and within the team, they have certain roles that they want to designate to certain users. So there is a authentication layer discussion that's happening, actually just picked up again, and we're looking into what platform we want to use there. I don't know if that's something, you know, as you know, on the observability side at Astronomer that we'll be focusing on. So it would be great to get more user community driven, I think, PRs and discussions happening. And I think last week we did see someone say, hey, and what's the status on authentication and authorization in Marquez? And I didn't link the issue, I'm sorry about that, but that is something I think I would love to have, especially with the new delete feature. It starts asking the question, you know, should there be an admin role? And if you're an admin, is that the only time you see delete? Or if you provide a one deployment for Marquez and there's multiple users on different teams, should they be able to access or be able to delete nodes that another team produced? Like if there's jobs or data sets that they own or they don't own, should they be able to delete that metadata? That's a question, right? The alert and notification, that there's a lot of changes in the metadata that Marquez has or is capturing. We just don't make it available. So Pawel, this was something that you a while back talked about, a list of, oh, new dataset version was created, or you know, in the UI you could see all the different changes that are happening to an object. Imagine if you have it where dataset or job A went from complete to failed. You should be, if you wanted to, be able to be notified that happened. So we're looking into how you can plug into Marquez, your Slack, or your PagerDuty or something, that if something does happen like that, you could begin to be notified. At the moment, a lot of it is just, it happens and there's no capturing of that. So there's a PR that I've been working on, but no formal proposal and issues that are related to it. I think we want to formalize and be able to give the option to the user to configure where some of these alerts should go. And going back to the facets and, you know, the individual tables that we have, it would be great. And this is more a discussion. And I think after this, I'm going to stop to see what people think. But we've always talked about custom facets and users defining custom facets for whatever reason within their org. There's metadata that they want to collect that's very specific to their organization. And how can we render that in the UI? So provide users a way to inject custom components in the Marquez UI, and based off their custom facets, whether they're aggregating and showing a graph or something like that, we want to be able to make that pluggable. And at the current moment, a lot of the UI is very fixed, although we do want some customization through custom facets. So it's also something I think it would be great to shoot for. I know our UI resources are very limited, but sort of like a North Star. Let me stop here before I go into the other two. And again, I feel like this is just, I'm just like, whatever's on my mind, I just wrote down. It might feel that way, but I also want feedback. And I'll go into this live roadmap that we do have, and we could discuss further there, but let me actually stop talking. All right, everyone's on board. I love it. Cool. Well, I'll continue. I'm just looking at, oh, we have 5 minutes. Wow. So scalability, I just wanted to show or talk about issues that we see at astronomers around data retention. So some of these tables can get very, very large. So data retention is a big component, especially around the runs table. There's a lot of runs that we do collect, and there's a lot of other tables that join on that table. So the performance is an issue there, and it's something that we are beginning to prioritize. And the one thing I wanted to show is in the Marquez UI. I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but we did add these two CI jobs. One is load testing. So we use K6 to do some load testing, and there's a report that eventually gets outputted here. I'm sorry, yeah. So there's the results and summary. We're starting to capture that to understand feature to feature what the performance looks like. We're not graphing it at the moment, and we're not analyzing it. We're just letting it run for a couple of weeks and then going back and analyzing some of those load tests and investing more into it. But initially we just wanted to hook in and see some of the results. So in the end, it's just JSON. I think there's a lot more that we can do here. We're just kind of capturing, posting lineage events that we're generating and then hitting the backend with X amount of users and getting a report that way. So the raw events themselves can be used to be processed later. And data modeling, query performance is something that we're always analyzing as well. So there are queries that need to be improved, and we're going to make some changes there as well, whether adding index or denormalizing a table or whatever. We are capturing a lot of that in production at Astronomer, and we're working towards improving those queries. And Howard, you've been involved a lot in the UI component. The lineage graph itself, the exploration part, whether it's interacting with deleting or highlighting nodes, I think you've done a lot of really great work there and identifying some things that we can improve. And I think there's one that's being worked on where it highlights the path of the lineage graph to just kind of highlight how are things dependent on one another. So there's more that we can do there. I know there was talk about, grouping nodes and additional things like that we do want to get more out there and push, because there are some changes at Astronomer that we could push upstream in the UI. And the last part is just documentation. So everyone knows, I think, we have this really amazing UI that was put together by Ross that has pretty much everything: the quick start, the resources, links to talks, blog posts. And with Ross and I, we've been talking about this with Michael and making a blog post or FAQ or something like, how are other organizations deploying Marquez? And I think we don't have a good example on that. Are they just deploying Marquez in a single instance with one Postgres instance, or is it a bit more distributed, where you're using the OpenLineage proxy server to proxy events to Kafka, consume right to the tables, and then have another read path? So as an organization scales running Marquez, so does the architecture. And I don't think we have a full story around that. And we should, because we're using Marquez on at Astronomer and building our observability product. And we are seeing architectural bottlenecks that we could share and should share. So expect some talks this year around how the architecture has evolved and some blog posts around that. And finally, the live roadmap can always be viewed here. So there are all the different changes that we would like to see in Marquez as well. So that's our live one.
We've got, sorry, Willy, we've got a couple minutes, and there's a question in the chat.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So let me go through the question which I have posted here. This is Brahma. So we are using ADF pipeline and we are sending the lineage of the data as an events to the Marquez UI. So in one of the activity, we have one HTTP activity where we are pulling the file and storing it into the ADLS. And we have another activity also pulling the data from public data sets, which is available in Azure, to read the taxi data, just for an example. And we are using the data and we are invoking the Databricks as an activity from the ADF. And inside the Databricks, we are referring these files as an input and generating the output. And the Spark is already generating the data sets and facets, everything, and storing it into the namespace under DBFS. So after that activity, I just want to refer that as an input to another activity. So when I refer that one, it is not showing up any metadata. So how this can be solved in case of the lineage, because one system generates the facets and everything will be available under different namespace. And how can we directly refer them into the other activity without just by referring as a data sets as an input in which has been generated in the previous as an output and input to the next activity. So when we do that one, it is not showing up any metadata. So it's just having overrating of anything, whatever is there in the existing one. I already have opened the discussion on this in the forum on the Git. So I'm just seeking an information or guidance from the people here so that I can proceed further with my data lineage activity.
Is it in Marquez or OpenLineage, the discussion?
I've opened it in the OpenLineage.
Okay,
So
okay.
because
Mm.
So if I understood you correctly, when you are writing a dataset, its namespace and name differs than the way you are reading it, right?
Spark creating that OpenLineage as a DBFS namespace. Under DBFS namespace, it creates all the data sets. I'm just giving the dataset name as whatever the Spark generated, which I'm seeing on the UI as a dataset name, and the namespace as DBFS. It is not linking anything to the dataset which is already generated by the Spark. Oh, hope you got it, or do you want me to just?
Yeah, I think partially got it. So some time ago, we developed a feature called dataset symlinks. So it happens sometimes in Spark that the same dataset can be named in a different way. So assume you've got a Hive table, and you may create an identifier to it, like a Hive metastore Hive table name. And if this table stores data in S3, you can read the same data through just reading the S3 location. Yeah? So in that sense, you've got a dataset that has two possible dataset identifiers. And that's why we created dataset symlink feature in OpenLineage, and we implemented it in Spark. So that for some dataset, you can say, hey, it's the primary name, but this dataset can be also identified by the other name. And once you tell it to Marquez just once, it will know that the lineage should be created, even if, you know, there are two different names for the same dataset. So, yeah, so I'm not sure if you could make use of it, because in Spark, you don't have an option to create symlink on your own. And yeah, I'm wondering why it doesn't do that on its own. Yeah, so that's interesting.
Yeah, and would it be able to? Do you remember what issue number it was? I know we're a little over time, but I think offline.
Right. Yeah, sure. I will ping you the issue number 1 second.
That'd be great. And obviously, example code goes a long way. So sometimes these scenarios, it's hard to predict every scenario that lineage will be collected in. And so if there's an example Spark job or application.
I attached everything in that lineage. I already texted in this chat as well. The 1494 is this one. And I attached there's a sample, the event which I have been posting as well, along with the names which I referred it in my document. And yeah.
Perfect. Oh, Pawel, you've been on top of it. Here you go. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I will make sure to get back to you on that.
Thank you.
This week. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Because this is the same case also. Suppose this is general, I have questions. So the lineage, whatever I see, the fundamental background of what this data lineage is getting built using OpenLineage, right? There are a number of teams working at different places or different geographical areas also. When they use this Marquez UI, the datasets is already being registered in the Marquez UI under different namespace. If you directly refer them as the main intention, what I am trying to achieve is, if I refer the namespace which is already generated by the other team and the dataset name I use, it should automatically link that one in the lineage graph. So I don't want to again specify the facets which has been already there and send as an event. Instead of that, the events and the facets which is already generated in the data set, which is a source to the other processor. So that will help the other teams not too much aware of that, what all the changes. If there is any changes also, this automatically reflect in that lineage. So no need to own, each team should pass that one. That is the main intention I'm just looking for here. So that kind of lineage, the joining point with the data sets which is already generated, refer the same namespace, and the source also I have provided. So still I'm not able to get. I just represented in the bottom of that issue. So the one which is generated by the Spark, I'm seeing like 3 fields, but what the same data sets which I referred it as an input to the my activity after the Databricks completes, it is not showing that metadata. It's showing 0 as a facets. Yeah, that is what I just want to see. Like, I understand the background and the phenomena about trying to help the industry. So to bring the data lineage and which helps to solve a lot of other plug-in and plug-out components which can be added later point of in the process, like alerting mechanism or generating tickets out of that. So that's what I just, this idea, whatever the background of this OpenLineage, I'm very much impressed with that. Yeah, that great. Will, thanks for putting together, and you have been working, and also Rastruck, I've been interacting with him on the Slack, so you would have based upon his inputs and everything. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining, and thanks for opening the issues and trying out OpenLineage and Marquez. We're going to continue this offline, and but I just want to say thanks for the support and maybe future contributions.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thank you, and thanks everyone, and we'll see you next month at the next meeting. Have a great day.
All right. Bye.
See you, folks.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone. Have a great day.